Hello and welcome to Security Insights. I'm Gunnar Peterson, CISO at Forder, the trust platform for digital commerce. And today I'm really excited to have CEO and co-founder of Suridata, Lee Kappon, joining us. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you so much. Really happy to be here and have our discussion today.
Super. Well, I do want to spend a lot of time on security and on your company. But before we do that, let's start with you, Lee, and your entrepreneurial journey. Not that many people start companies from scratch, right? So I'm curious for other people listening in here, what is that process like to actually start a company? Did you just wake up one day and look out the window and say, I want to start a product company? Like, what started you down this path? Was it something you always knew that you always wanted to do, or was it a market hole that you found, or just a chance to build something new? What were your personal drivers?
So I get this question quite a lot, and I've actually had the chance to think about it because I got it so many times. And I think that from my perspective at least, right, different entrepreneurs, different stories. But for me, as I remember myself, I was always really self-driven to find something that doesn't work well, solve problems that I saw that doesn't just make sense. I was always really highly motivated in everything I did. I never accepted, no, it doesn't work, it can work, anything like this. And I think that I was always very ambitious to solve things and find better ways and better path and better, just make things better. If something didn't work, I just couldn't accept the fact that it doesn't work, and that's it. We really have to solve it. And really, since I remember myself, that's the way I looked at things since high school, and then the army, and then as a student. I always, took part in different delegations or made my own initiatives if something didn't work or didn't exist at all. And I think that's just was part of my life. And after the army, I worked with two friends about a business for about 4, almost 5 years. It was my really first real life experience of building something from scratch. A product, a business, managing teams abroad. It was really an amazing experience of taking something that didn't really exist and build around it. And then after this experience, we had really great outcomes, and I decided to go see some large corporate environments, see how large organizations work and operate, and get this perspective. So I think the best school. I went to the Big Fours. In my last role, I was leading NLP-based technologies for a global firm. Was working very closely with IT and security, and I experienced the challenges that Suridata solves today. And for me, it was, just a matter of how and when, and not if. I knew that I'm always knew that I'm going back to this.
And it's just a fascinating story, because I think in the technology world, there's a lot of people who are technology ambitious about finding a problem and fixing it. But there are very, very few people who can also see the technology problem, find a solution, and then build a whole business around it. Like that third skill is, I think, something that's really elusive. So let's switch and talk about Suridata. It's an area of the market that got very little attention over the years, like third party and supply chain. If you went back 10 years ago, I don't think too many people were really focused on this. Not to say there weren't risks, like the risks were always there and they were latent. And, thanks to things like SolarWinds and some of these other breaches, people are starting to really ramp up and pay attention to them. Can you talk about what you see as driving the market for buyers today, and like, how do you think about the size and scope of the market that you're playing in today?
So let's start with the fact that we see in the past 2-3 years changing the number and the adoption rate of SaaS and third parties in general, right? I'm not even talking about the transition from on-prem to cloud, which is pretty obvious and still going on for a large organization, but the fact that people work remotely, They're not in specific base. They don't want to develop their own tools. They want to rely on others that have developed and provide great solutions out there. And the number of adoption of third parties just increased dramatically in the past few years. People work remotely. They want to move fast. They want to do their job great. And they understand they don't have to do it themselves from scratch. And that's something that really affected our specific industry. And as you mentioned, there are really high profile breaches that originated from third parties through really simple OAuth connection or service account or even known applications, right? And just a rapid phase of adoption. We all talk about Gen AI technology that really drive businesses to rely on third parties, right? Today it's Gen AI, tomorrow it will be something else, but it's relying on other technologies to do our day-to-day jobs better and quicker and more efficient. And when you adopt this type of solution, it became very, very easy to do it, right? It's just consent, just press next, and people adopt them. They don't think about the security consequences, but that's fine. That's their job. If I'm from marketing or sales or product or R&D, that's my job. That's what I want to do. And I don't think about the security aspects, and that's fine. That's the security people's role, right? And we all feel that that's okay. But the thing is that the risk comes from the outside, from all the interconnections. Each SaaS or an application, it's not a standalone thing, right? They're all connected. That's the great thing about it. You can attach it, you can onboard it, you can do very easily interconnections between them. And the risk that comes with these type of interconnections are blind spots to different tools today. No one monitors or see or can understand what needs to be remediated. And since the number and complexity of these environments really increased in the past few years, that's our goal, to help them get the visibility to understand that attack surface, to understand how things move in this environment. And of course, there are new regulations around third parties. For example, the new SEC rules that mandates companies to disclose information about third parties issue found in their environment. How you can do it if you don't see the environment, right? If you're not even aware to the ecosystem of all the interconnections you have.
And I think those standards are helpful too, because also if you are the third party, I think that most of the companies are probably trying to do the right thing, but they don't know, they're interpreting it one way or the other. So like what should a good third party come to the table with? Like, how do you get the good housekeeping seal of approval and, beyond the PCIs and the SOC 2s of the world, like what is actually good security work? I think that would help a lot of companies know what that looks like too. Do you, I mean, the amount of dependencies also, I assume, goes to both developer side as well as just the core business side. And so you see a market in both of those places, I assume.
Yeah, we see that they're all connected, right? You can have connection from the corporate enterprise environment to the production environment, and you won't see it because when you monitor the production environment, you monitor the reactions over there. You won't monitor spikes coming in from a third party or a SaaS environment. But eventually, if an attacker is gaining access to a third party with lateral movement, they can actually gain access to your production environment. And these aspects are not really I would say monitored or seen or addressed.
Or even understood, I think, right? There was a guy on YouTube a few years ago who I think he said, here's how I can make an egg sandwich in 180 days. And he like bought a chicken and he like started growing wheat and he started making butter from scratch. He made all of the ingredients of a sandwich. And it took him, 180 days to make one sandwich type of thing. And I think people don't understand the layers of dependencies to the degree that you saw, not just that they had the dependencies, but that there'd be a security risk to address there. And then I assume efficiency gains as well. But let's flip around to the defender side of the table. Now, you're defending a large global company or something, let's say. What are the options that a defender sitting as a SaaS buyer, what do they really have to understand about securing a package of controls around all of these SaaS dependencies that they have. I think today, a lot of times we see the checkbox Olympics where you're just torturing vendors, and it's not clear to me necessarily that those those checklists, the intent is fantastic. Some of the questions are good, but do you think companies should really get a lot of comfort from going through this checkbox Olympics approach that you see, and what can you learn over and above that by actually scanning these SaaS systems?
Mm-hmm. So first, I think that the buyer's perspective should really understand the fact that there is a shared responsibility model, right? You think that you buy Salesforce or Jira or HubSpot or any of these one and they're secure, then that's fine. But in fact, the way they're being used in the company, the way plugins and add-ons are being connected and attached to them, that's something that the provider can see, it can monitor, cannot help with securing, and that's a responsibility of on the buyer side, right? To understand how these type of applications are being used and monitor and what the risk that resides there. And the thing about SaaS is that it's dynamic. It's not something that changes every year or 2 years. So having a check on your checklist, that's okay, but it won't really help you if you want to mitigate the risk that exists there, because every
Right.
day.
It could change from the time that you order the pizza to the time the developers receive the pizza. They could have checked in code, right? Like that's how quickly it can change.
Love it. Love the example, because that's exactly it, right? And the vendors, they monitor and they decide what they want to release and change and update. And if you would have kept with the phase of each and every one of them, when you have hundreds or thousands in your environment, it will be just an tedious manual work that requires learning and expertise, because every vendor is different. Every SaaS application, every third-party application is different. And trying to navigate and understand in this dynamic environment how you do it, I would say that's quite challenging. So perspective that can basically scan all the environment, understand the risk that's related to them, understand the interconnection, understand it's not a standalone thing, and you need to have an holistic approach and not a niche solution that will drill down into one thing. Because eventually, and you mentioned a little bit about breaches, but if you analyze recent breaches, you'll see that these breaches were so impactful because the manipulation of a few exposures and risk. They occur because attackers actually find these gaps and exploit them one after another. It's not just one thing. It's not a standalone gap or risk, or just like you probably have backlogs of risk that you can address, or you don't have the resources or the time to do it. But eventually, when you connect the dots and you really understand the combination of an overly scoped OAuth connection, right? Followed by a misconfiguration, then exposed credentials, you understand that this type of combination are actually what makes the attacker give the attacker the ability to do something, to gain access to your environment, to find data, to steal it, to create, to really harm the business. And when you understand that it's dynamic and it's not only just one thing, you understand kind of the bigger picture, the perspective of the entire ecosystem needs to be addressed.
And yeah, that's a great example. And there's no way the world's greatest checklist can't, and I think checklists have a role. I'm not saying to eliminate checklists, but I think, the world's greatest checklist cannot solve the problem that you just described because of the dynamic nature. But let's skip ahead to now. You've identified a problem in a third party. You have identified a problem in a SaaS. And I feel like even if I'm at a pretty big company, if I pick up the phone and I call Salesforce and I call Amazon, dial 1-800 Jeff Bezos and say, "Hey, I found something. Can you please fix this?" How do you have good examples, I guess, of where your identification of a security issue led to a meaningful improvement in security posture on these SaaS systems?
Definitely. So there are different type of actions that can be done when you find the bigger picture and the risk across this environment. It can start with really simple revoke permission to either unauthorized or untrusted third parties or different applications. It can be about implementation of security controls like MFA or SSO. Sometimes you can't control, you don't have an admin console to some of the applications, right? But you can at least ensure that there's security controls implemented in the environment, like the ones mentioned. You can change permission, and you can give less intrusive types of permission across different environments or SaaS applications or applications in general. And also a very important thing would be monitor the behavior, right? Because sometimes, as you mentioned, you can check some of the checkbox, but eventually if an attacker is inside the organization, they will try to navigate and act as much as they can in order to gain access to sensitive content that they can manipulate and use. And monitoring in real time and understand the behavior. And if there is something suspicious that needs your attention, immediate real time, I would say investigation and remediation, that's something that also needs to be done. It can be done. And overall, I think that it's important to remember that it's really ongoing. They're rapidly changing, and hardening and checklists is just the first thing. But then eventually, if you need to look and monitor activities and crucial behaviors around that, then you're at least able to minimize the impact of a breach if occurred, or at least response before the attacker gain access to the real content you don't want them to get.
Great. And like so much of this seems to me for your value proposition to be about integration, and that, you can go on the Suridata website and see all the different integration touch points that you have to so many different SaaS vendors. I'm curious how how you think about it as as running a tech business where you have, I think, pretty unique set of horizontal spread across the organization, because everyone from HR to finance to developers, they're all using SaaS, as you say. If you're selling, I don't know, let's just say Wiz or something where they're just installing into AWS, they kind of know their customer is going to be a developer and they're going to be in AWS or GCP or Azure, whatever they are. But you're selling, I think, probably, or getting requirements from across the whole organizational, the whole org chart basically is going to potentially give you requirements. Do you see different security requirements coming from different teams, and how does that change or not your product?
I think that what we realized and learned is that business units, no matter if it's finance or marketing or any kind of department, they look at the security around the application they use the same. They don't care. They don't have any.
It's a dial tone. I'll pick up the phone. It needs to work, right? Yeah.
They just want to do the minimum or just don't do anything. So they just want to work, right? So what we see is basically the security teams coming in and sometimes tell us we don't even have access to this application. They don't want to create us user to a very sensitive HR solution, right? But they want us to help them secure it. So there is a gap, right? So that's where we're stepping in and telling them exactly the unified view. Our goal is to unify the process around it, right? It doesn't matter if it's an HR or a product or sales. Eventually, there is data there that you want to secure. You want to make sure it won't get to the wrong hands. So by unifying it and handle different units, I would say business critical application, having a streamlined process that works with the business owners can give, I would say, both efficient process to the security in front of or versus the business unit process, and also give them really the understanding of what's more critical, because eventually there are thousands of applications and thousands of different risks that comes with that. Our goal is to connect the dots and tell them what's more critical for them to handle, but then helping guiding the business units, right? Because even if you handle the Salesforce or the Jira or the Slack, eventually you don't know what you should do as a business unit. So our expertise is to guide security team and help them guide the business units. And of course, giving them the options to handle things themselves, like enforcing SSO or MFA, right? It will have some impact on the business owners, but eventually they will have a very comprehensive, broad view across all the organization, and having the ability to communicate and solve it before it is being manipulated.
I mean, that's a great point, because it's for sure true that SaaS is a new operating model for security teams as well, and they need trusted partners that they can work with to help them guide through this new world. Well, Lee Kappon and Suridata, all the best to you on your entrepreneurial journey, and all the best on fighting the good fight in a area that I do think that industry needs more and better tools. So hats off to you for building this company and getting it out there. Thank you for joining Security Insights today, Lee.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure. Thank you.